What happens when the man who built an empire from the ground up steps into the very business that made him who he is today, disguised as just another customer? What happens when he realizes the power of loyalty and the bonds that go unnoticed in the rush for success? Let's dive into the story of Ben Masters, a man whose life was defined by his drive, his ambition, and his quest to climb higher, no matter the cost. Ben Masters was not the type of man who lived for the spotlight. He didn't need the fame, the accolades, or the endless praise from the public. What he needed was progress, results, and success. And he achieved all of it, starting with the humble little coffee shop called Bean Brothers. But Ben wasn't always this hardened business tycoon. There was a time, years ago, when he stood behind the counter grinding coffee beans, serving hot cups of coffee to local customers with a smile. He was just a young man back then, in his early 20s, with a dream and a passion for great coffee. The shop wasn't much, just a small corner store on Main Street, but it was his. And that's all he needed. Fast forward 15 years, and the same coffee shop that once served as the foundation of his dreams was now just another notch in his belt. Bean Brothers had grown into a nationwide franchise. It was on every corner in every major city. Ben Masters had built a coffee empire, and he didn't look back. However, Ben's rise to success hadn't come without sacrifice. Somewhere along the way, the man who used to know every regular customer by name became a stranger to the people who helped him get to the top. The small town that once welcomed him with open arms now felt distant. The community he built his business in was no longer the same. And Ben, despite all the money and success, felt an emptiness that he couldn't explain. It was one fateful morning when Ben, tired of board meetings and endless corporate schedules, decided to visit Bean Brothers one more time, this time in disguise. No suit, no designer clothes, no expensive watch, just a plain hoodie, a pair of jeans, and sunglasses. He was determined to see the coffee shop with fresh eyes, to remember what it was like before the chaos of the business world overtook him. He stepped into the familiar coffee shop, the bell above the door ringing as it always had. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans, the hum of the espresso machine, and the murmur of the few customers scattered around the room were comforting. It felt like home, yet it didn't. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 40s, with a gray beard and a warm smile. His name was Steve, and he had been working at the shop for as long as Ben could remember. Steve had always been there, silently supporting Ben's dream with quiet loyalty, never asking for anything in return. Ben walked up to the counter and greeted Steve. "Morning. I'll take a black coffee, please." Steve nodded, smiling as he poured the hot liquid into a cup. "Coming right up, Ben. You've been away for a while, haven't you?" Ben froze, his heart skipping a beat. Steve hadn't recognized him at first, but that name, it hit him. Steve knew him. Not as the CEO of an empire, but as a young man who once worked alongside him, serving coffee and sharing dreams. Ben was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. How could Steve still remember him? And why did it feel like he was being pulled into something much deeper than a simple coffee order? As Steve handed him the cup, Ben finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "You remember my name?" Steve looked at him with a twinkle in his eye. "Of course I do. You've come a long way since the days when we worked side by side here. You're a man of great vision, Ben. You always had that fire in you." Ben's heart sank. He hadn't realized just how much he had distanced himself from the people who had helped him. Steve, the quiet, loyal employee, had been there all along, watching him climb, never asking for recognition. But Steve wasn't done yet. "You know, Ben," he said softly, "there's a lot of people who don't see what's really important. They get caught up in the chase. They forget the roots of what made them who they are." Ben felt a lump form in his throat. This was not the conversation he expected to have that day. He had come here to see how the business was doing, maybe get a feel for how things were running, but instead, he was being confronted with a truth he had long ignored. "Steve, I don't know what I've been doing," Ben said, his voice cracking. "I've been so focused on growing the business, on making money and building this empire, that I forgot what it was all about. I forgot about people like you who helped me get here. People who've been loyal, day in and day out, without asking for anything in return. Steve's smile softened. You don't need to apologize, Ben. You've done great things. But sometimes we need to pause and remember who we are, where we came from. It wasn't just Steve who had stayed loyal to Ben's vision. As the day went on, Ben observed the other customers in the shop. They were the same regulars who used to sit at the tables, laughing, talking, and enjoying a cup of coffee. They didn't know he was the CEO. They didn't care. They came for the community, the warmth of the shop, and the simple joy of a well-made cup of coffee. Ben watched as an elderly man, Mr. Thompson, walked in. Mr. Thompson had been coming to Bean Brothers every morning for the last 10 years. He was always there, sitting in the same corner, sipping on his coffee, reading the newspaper. Today was no different. But today, something was different for Ben. He realized that he had been so focused on expanding his empire, so wrapped up in numbers and growth, that he had forgotten the people who made it all possible. The customers who made Bean Brothers more than just a business. They made it a community, a place where people felt seen and valued. It wasn't just about selling coffee. It was about creating a space for people to connect, to share stories, to build relationships. And Ben had lost sight of that somewhere along the way. As the day came to a close, Ben made his decision. He walked up to Steve one last time. I've been thinking, Ben said, his voice steady now. I've neglected this place, but not anymore. I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to make sure this shop is more than just a business. I'm going to make it a place where people can feel like they belong again. Steve looked at him, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. You don't have to do anything, Ben. You've already made a difference. You've created something special here. All it takes is remembering what's important. And with that, Ben Masters knew that the true value of his success wasn't in the money, the accolades, or the power. It was in the people, the loyal customers, the hardworking employees, the community he had built, one cup of coffee at a time. That night, as Ben lay in bed, he couldn't help but think about the lesson he had learned. Life wasn't just about climbing the ladder. It was about remembering the people who helped you climb, the ones who stayed by your side, who believed in you when no one else did, the ones who made you who you were. Ben didn't need to be the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company to be happy. All he needed was the sense of belonging, the connection to the people who mattered, and the quiet joy of knowing that what he had built wasn't just a business, it was a family. And so, Ben Masters made a promise to himself. He would never again lose sight of what truly mattered. He would stay connected, stay humble, and never forget the loyalty of the old customers, like Steve, who had stood by his side when everything else was changing. Because in the end, it wasn't the empire that made him successful, it was the people who helped him build it. So, moral of the story, success is fleeting, but loyalty, connection, and remembering where you came from last forever. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. If you'd like to show some extra love, tap the 3 dots near the share button and send a super thanks.